No Catholic Church, no Bible. When I started learning about the Catholic Church, I realized something no one had ever told me. The only reason we even have a Bible today is because the Catholic Church preserved it. At Mass, the readings cover more of Scripture than most Christians ever hear in their entire lives. And Catholic teaching has always said Scripture is inspired, sacred, and true, just not always interpreted literally the way modern people would assume. But the Bible wasn't compiled into one book until
350 and 405 AD. So the Catholic Church organized the Bible, which is great.
Rome 382, Hippo 393, and Carthage 397 that officially recognized the New Testament canon we use today. Later, the Council of Trent reaffirmed the same canon.
This is simply wrong. I have a longer video about this on the tube, but the history is much more fascinating than the Catholic Church simply putting it all together. For instance, the Old Testament was already set long before that, but we seem to only be focusing on the New Testament here. So first thing, we know almost nothing about the Council of Rome. Yes, a canon of Scripture was present, but it wasn't created there. The same goes for the Council of Hippo. Again, we know almost nothing about it. We do know more about the Council of Carthage, which seems to reaffirm this list of Scripture, but none of these councils in the late 4th century compiled this list. A decade and a half prior to the Council of Rome, we have the 39th Festal Letter of Athanasius, which lists the 27 books of the New Testament, and sticks with Jewish tradition for the Old Testament. This list was composed in 367. As a frame of reference, this was prior to the official establishment of the Catholic Church, which appears to be around 380. But we can push this back further. Jumping back to 350, we have Cyril of Jerusalem, who lists 26 books of the New Testament. Cyril leaves off the book of Revelations, so we are almost there, but if we jump back to 330, to Eusebius, we are told that the Apocalypse of John, also known as Revelation, is disputed. Some churches accept it, while others reject it. Speaking of Eusebius, he does break down what the various positions of the canon were. He lists the books that were universally accepted, which were the 4 Gospels, Acts, Paul's letters, which he included Hebrews with, 1 John, and 1 Peter, and Revelation. He does admit that Revelation is disputed by some, though. He also lists books that were disputed but recognized by many as canon. These include James, Jude, 2 Peter, 2 John, and 3 John. So within these 2 lists, we have the New Testament books. We can go a bit further back, though, to Origen around 230. There's some debate here, but it appears that Origen produced a canon list that includes our 27 books. Now, he doesn't specifically state 2nd and 3rd John, but he mentions that he has epistles, plural. He also doesn't list Revelations in his homilies on Joshua, where he breaks down the canon list, but he does express that it should be canon in other places. So it's not necessarily a direct hit, but it's also not necessarily a miss. Finally, we should also probably mention the Muratorian fragment from around 170. As the name implies, this is just a fragment, a damaged fragment of a poor Latin translation of a Greek original. So we aren't fully certain what is there, but we can be certain that it contained most of the text of our modern canon. It also contains a couple of texts, though, such as the Apocalypse of Peter and the Book of Wisdom. It should be clear, though, that the canon was established long before it was officialized, though. Basically, what we have then is that the Catholic Church later on took centuries of prior work which set on establishing a canon, and then took this already established canon and just declared that it was official now. There are 2 more things here, though. First, in the early 4th century, as an aside to the Council of Nicaea, we get Constantine commissioning some copies of the Bible. This was half a decade prior to the Council of Rome, and most interesting here, we may have a couple copies of these Bibles. Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus may be products of this commission. Second, though, it wasn't until the Council of Trent in 1546 in which the Catholic canon was officially approved. So even though prior councils had agreed on a set of text, it wasn't official until millennia afterwards, and that was partially in response to Martin Luther deeming that the Deuterocanonical books were not scripture, but still useful. To be clear, though, he didn't remove them from the Bible. By this time, we actually have a few other canons as well.
Many of us know that the last book of the Bible was finished around 90 to 95 AD. So all the books of the Bible were finished before the term Catholic Church was even invented or mentioned.